Hi, I'm Simon and welcome to Retro Computing Reboot. In this video, we're going to take a look at a game for the Spectrum called Shadow of the Unicorn. Now, the game itself is perhaps nothing special. It's just another graphical adventure which got reasonable reviews back in the day. However, what did make the game special was to play it, you needed an add-on cartridge called the MIkro Plus, which came bundled in, obviously, with the game. Now, thanks to Stephen Smith from Project Specky, we're going to build his recreation of that MIkro Plus cartridge and hopefully get the game playing. It's a game that I've not played before, so I'm curious to try it out. So when you've watched this video, if you fancy building one of these yourself, there is a link in the video description to the PCBWay projects page where there's full instructions and a full list of materials for everything you'll need to build it. There's also a link that you can click on which makes the ordering of the PCB incredibly easy to do. So thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. Now, this little cart offered huge potential because it effectively unleashed a further 16K of memory for program developers to use in the game development. Now, it did that by effectively blocking out the internal ROM on the Spectrum, so it didn't load into the Spectrum Basic, and instead it booted off whatever code was written on the external ROM on the cartridge. And so by doing that, they had another 16K worth of programming to play with. And not only that, but it also included a joystick port, which meant you didn't need to buy another interface. Now, these games were marketed at £15, where at the time it was around £10 for a premium cassette game. So it wasn't even a big price jump. But yet it was a huge failure for Mikro-Gen. And there's one reason for that, and one reason only, and that is the game itself, Shadow of the Unicorn. Now, originally, the developers at Mikro-Gen had been looking to release the first game of 3 Weeks in Paradise, part of the Wally series. And there was much debate about it, but the management won and Shadow of the Unicorn was released. And it went on to sell somewhere in the region of 11,000 units, but it needed to sell a further 30,000 to break free. So there was consternation amongst all the distributors who'd invested heavily and bought up units and then not sold. The licensing deals that Mikro-Gen had with third-party companies such as Ocean to license this technology and use in their games all fell through because everyone viewed the technology as not worth it. And as a result of that, the £130,000 that Mikro-Gen had invested in this technology, which is around just short of £400,000 today, effectively bankrupted them and brought the company to its knees, which is a real shame, really, because they did produce some fantastic games. Sadly, though, Shadow of the Unicorn wasn't one of them. And ironically, it wasn't even a game that was developed in-house. It was a game that was bought in. But due to rushing, it was decided that they couldn't wait a further 2 weeks for 3 Weeks in Paradise. And this is the end result. A bit of a unicorn in itself, really, ironically. So to build this, you're going to need the following. And there we have 5 1N4148 signal diodes. You're also going to need a Spectrum edge connector that we've got there. We're going to need one SN74LS32N logic chip, which we've got there. We're going to need a D-sub right-angled joystick port, and we're going to need an EEPROM that we've got programmed with the Shadow of the Unicorn ROM. This is a 27C128 compatible chip that we've got there. And we're also going to need the PCB for it all to go on. This board, though, was very kindly sent to me by David. And I mentioned that I didn't have an EEPROM programmer, so he very kindly sent me the programmed EEPROM and the logic chip as well. So thank you, David, for sending me those. That is awesome and much appreciated. I will get myself a programmer in due course, I am sure. It's worth mentioning on this build, I was originally going to socket all the ICs, all two of them. However, I'm not going to, and the reason for that is I've simply run out of sockets. So I'm going to take a punt and not socket them. I'm sure David has programmed them correctly and I won't have any issues. But if you are going to use sockets, just be mindful of the clearance between the board and the Spectrum itself. If you're using an edge connector with short pins, then you need to be mindful of making sure that you do actually have enough clearance. For me, I negated that problem and I ordered myself a long pin edge connector, which you can find on eBay. I'm sure it's where I got mine from. So whether I'm using sockets or not, I'm not going to have a clearance issue when I come to connect it into the Spectrum. But you need to be mindful of that, especially if you're using sockets, as you don't want to find that you can't insert the edge connector far enough because the chips get in the way. So I think what I'm going to do to begin with is fit the diodes, which you just need to be mindful with these that they're inserted the correct way around. And you'll see from the silk screen printing that there's a little line on the end, and that wants to correspond with the diode there, the black end there. So we've got that the correct way around. So let's just bob that through and we'll bend the legs out just to keep it in place while we solder it. So that's that ready for soldering. The next thing I think we're going to do then is fit this logic chip, which I don't know if you can see on there, but there's a little notch at the bottom of the chip which needs to line up with the notch down on the PCB. So we'll slot that in if we can with that correct orientation. Now I'll just flip it over. I'm not going to tape it. I'm not too stressed about that. And we'll just put a blob of solder on each corner, and then we can just heat it up and make sure it's sat flat. So we'll do it like that. So let's do this top left one first. And then just to make sure it's sat nice and flat, just heat up each corner whilst putting a little bit of pressure onto it. There, sat nice and flat. Right, let's do the rest of those pins. Let's now get this EEPROM fitted. once again, just making sure that we're aligning the notch on this side with PCB notch, which is at the top as I've got the board orientated. So you may be using a socket. Like I say, I've run out of sockets, so I'm putting this directly to the board. I'd probably recommend using a socket though, to be fair, but I use what I've got. There we go, just make sure all the pins are nicely inserted, you've not bent any. And once again, we'll solder alternate corners, and then we'll just make sure the chips sat nice and flush, and then we'll solder the rest of the pins. Iron should be heating up nicely now. Always helps, doesn't it? Making sure the iron's hot enough. So, with a bit of luck, it should be warm enough now. Let's give it a whirl. So that's top left done. We'll do the other corner, and then we'll just heat it up and just make sure it's completely flush. There we go. So it does look nice and flush, but let's just heat it up with a bit of pressure on. Yeah, it's nice and flush. Yep, happy with that. So let's put the rest of the solder on. So next thing to do is I'm going to fit the joystick port, which is made rather much easier because we've got these two fingers, if you can see those, on each side. You see that? Those just plug into the motherboard nicely and hold the port in place. So that's going to make life easier. So we'll push that into the board nice and steady. And you hear that nice click as they clip in. It's just a case of spinning it over and giving it a solder. And then we'll just do the pins. So last but not least, it's time to fit the edge connector. Now I've already slid it through because it's a bit awkward to fit all those pins through in one go. So I've saved you the bother of watching me fiddle with that off camera. Now I've already trial fitted it and I'm absolutely fine with the clearance with it butted right up with the Spectrum. You may need to be more careful with that, especially if you're using sockets, to make sure that you've got enough clearance so it goes into the Spectrum without fouling on the case. Otherwise you're going to have issues and end up redoing it. So with the heating iron hopefully warmed up, let's just put a couple on, and then we'll make sure that it's nice and square. Let's just spin that around, it'll make it easy for me soldering. So I'm hoping that's approximately square. So let's put some solder on. That's one. Let's spin it round and put another blob on in this corner up here. Lovely jubbly. Now let's just check it's nice and square. Well, I'm quite happy with that. Good luck for you. I'm quite happy that that's nice and square. So I will solder up the rest of the connectors and then we'll be ready to give it a try. So now with everything soldered on, these pins are obviously far too long now for what I need, so I'm just going to trim them all off. So that's it built. The only thing left to do now is get it plugged in and see if it works. Just lining up those holes. Oh, that's not firm. That's really firm. It's in there. Just remember, when you're plugging anything in or taking anything out on the edge connector, make sure the power is not connected, otherwise you may have a very sad day indeed. Right, let's see what happens. Right, I'll just change the view. Right, fingers crossed. Ooh. Well, I think that is working. Isn't that good? Right, next thing I need to do then is, let me think, let me get my TZX Arduino set up and let's load the game into it. Right, let's just shift that over to one side. I've got my TZX Arduino here, and as you can hopefully see, it's set up ready to play Shadow the Unicorn, because what you must do is you must load the rest of the game in. So I'm going to use this to do that with. Right. There we go. Right, so there we go. It's all ready to go. Let's press 1 to load game from tape, and then press play on the TZX Arduino. Press it again, Well, everything seems to work there, doesn't it? So let's press 1 and start a new game. I've got the joystick plugged in, so let's see if that works too. Got nothing from the joystick. This joystick works fine with all my other stuff, so I doubt it's the joystick that's the problem. Or was there a configuration setting that I missed? Let's go for the keys. That's right. Right, left. Turn left. Turn right. Oh. Well. Share Max Amulet. So there you have it, Shadow of the Unicorn for the ZX Spectrum. A fun, cheap little build, and one that, even though the game doesn't necessarily grab you to begin with, I think it's well worth doing, and hope you have a go at it yourself. I've played the game for a couple of hours now, and I'm still not really any the wiser. It's one of those games I would suggest that you've really got to have a bit of a read up on and get more of an idea. It's not something where you just jump straight in. So that's what I'm going to do. It has a similar sort of like feel to it as the likes of the classic Mike Singleton's Lord of Midnight. And I thoroughly enjoyed playing that, but that game too took me a while to get into. So maybe the same is true of Shadow of the Unicorn. Time will tell. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. If you like to see more of this sort of stuff, then do remember to subscribe. That would be truly awesome. And if you would like to support me financially, there is a link in my channel description. That said, thank you for watching, as always, and I hope to see you in another video very soon. Bye for now.